Colette, shall I get started?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on our meeting today. We have a guest that is going to be presenting for us that I will be introducing in just a moment. However, I wanted to thank the University of Idaho Extension, specifically Colette DePhelps and Mackenzie Lawrence, for helping us by setting up this platform with technology assistance. They have been so critical in the role of supporting the Moscow Chamber of Commerce. So we really appreciate the partnership that we have with them and the support that they continue to provide us. It's so very much appreciated on behalf of the Chamber and our leadership. Colette is actually going to provide some tips in regard to how our platform is going to be set up today. So I'd like to pass it on to Colette DePhelps to provide some housekeeping items and a few brief announcements.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. So I know we're getting really familiar with Zoom these days. I have noticed over the past couple of days that a lot of people have been struggling with their bandwidth. If that does happen, that you are having sound that is seeming to slow down or people's videos are freezing, at any time you can type into the chat box and you'll see that box in the control bar at the bottom of your screen for technical assistance. So just type in there, Mackenzie and I will let you know if that is on your side or if it's on the side of the speaker. And if you are having problems with your sound, you can also call in using the welcome number that was in your email. And if you want to do that, go ahead and type in the chat box and we can guide you through how to make sure you're not going to get feedback with your computer. During the presentation today, you're welcome to type into the Q&A box any questions that you have for Matt. And so it's really helpful to us if you could make sure to direct those questions from our speaker into the Q&A box rather than the chat. It helps us be able to keep the tech assistance and the Q&A portion of today's presentation separate. A recording of this presentation is going to be available through the Chamber's YouTube page, and at the end of today's program, we will show you where that is. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Jenny.
Thanks so much, Colette. So our theme today for our presentation is titled Idaho Tourism in a COVID World. And I have the privilege of introducing our presenter, Matt Borud, who's a great partner for the Moscow Chamber of Commerce and also has become a great friend throughout the last 3 years I've been at the Chamber of Commerce. But some background for Matt, and you'll see this on as well as on the PowerPoint, but I just wanted to give him a brief introduction. So Matt Borud is the Marketing and Innovation Administrator at Idaho Commerce. His role focuses on unifying the department's communication, marketing, and innovation initiatives through programs like the Idaho Global Entrepreneurial Mission Grant Program, Idaho Tourism, and Idaho Commerce's marketing program. Before joining Idaho Commerce, Matt worked for a Boise-based software company where he focused on business development and customer success. Matt has a BA from the University of Oregon, and his wife, Gina, daughter, and son reside in Boise, Idaho. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Matt. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks, Jenny. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'm going to take control of the screen here and see if we can get that up here. I'm going to do the slideshow as well. All right, so
flawless.
Oh, there we go. Put this over here. Minimum. Let's see here. There we go. All right. Let's see. Let me get that. Maybe not quite flawless, but close. Well, Jenny, thank you very much for the warm welcome and everybody for the opportunity to be here and speak with you today. To echo Jenny's point, Moscow Chamber is a wonderful partner of us at Idaho Commerce, of our team at Idaho Tourism, and we're grateful for all of our friends and partners in Moscow, the University of Idaho, and so many wonderful businesses there. It pains me to not be able to be with you guys in person today because there are quite literally few places in the world I would rather be than Moscow, Idaho in the fall. And it's painful to not be able to be up there and maybe grab a slice of pizza at Myelina or something like that. I would much rather be doing that than being here at home. But I hope everybody's staying safe, and I hope everybody's staying healthy, and look forward to some of the discussion today. So what I want to do is talk through some of the things that we're seeing at a state level, and then provide kind of some regional and local perspective as well. And as Jenny had said, we'll kind of talk through the lens of what we're seeing in this, kind of in a COVID world right now, as it's affected the travel and tourism industry. I read some forecasts that talked about, when we think about some of the job losses since COVID hit, real hard in that March timeframe. I think it was March 11th when the WHO declared a global pandemic. Upwards of 40%, maybe even more, jobs that were lost in that time period or that have been lost can be attributed to the travel, tourism, hospitality industries. So what we're talking about today, these are real significant impacts. And I want to make sure to preface this with a couple of things. Number one, all of this information could be moot next week. And I think we're all living in this world of understanding that the ground is still really shifting under our feet. And so we're looking at really kind of these micro snapshots, unfortunately. So I want to make sure to caveat it with that as this recording goes up, might not make much sense in 2 weeks. I hope that some of the trends we're seeing, because we are seeing some positive trends, do continue. And I guess to that point, as we're very mindful of, as we are talking about, we are seeing some positive trends. We are seeing some reason for optimism. But that doesn't mean that times aren't still extremely hard. It doesn't mean that we're in a good place, because for many people and for many businesses and for many communities, we are not in a particularly good place. So I want to make sure that we pay deference there, and that we do keep driving forward and pushing forward in the areas that are going well. And so, again, coming at this from a state perspective, I am tremendously privileged to get to be a part of the senior leadership team at the Commerce Department, and be a part of a great Idaho tourism team that gets to represent the entire state. And we've got some unbelievable places and locations across our state, but I'll tell you, there are a few better than in the north central Idaho area and in and around Moscow. If you've heard me present before, or any member of my team, you've likely heard us talk about the fact that the travel and tourism industry is the state's third largest industry, behind ag and food production and then technology. This is an industry that's been growing tremendously. I apologize for the outdated data here. Normally we would do these are 2017 numbers. Normally we do an economic impact report every 2 years. We would have done it for 2019, would have done it this spring, but when COVID hit, we thought it would make more sense to wait so we would have 2020 numbers to better understand the full economic impact of COVID in our economic impact study. So these numbers are a little bit dated. These are from 2017, but in 2017, travelers spent $3.7 billion in Idaho. And we believe through some of the other data sources that we utilize that we're seeing from a spending perspective, we've seen growth in that range in the 5, 6, 7% per year in visitor spending numbers. And then in terms of actual hard visitation numbers, individuals, people actually setting foot in Idaho, those numbers are growing by about 3% annually. So we expect to see a nice uptick in some of these numbers here as well. And this is vital spending. This is vital to our economy. This industry represents direct jobs, 45,800 jobs in Idaho. 1 in 18 jobs in Idaho is in the travel, tourism, hospitality industry. And those jobs pay about $1.1 billion annually statewide. And when we look at this and we talk about the money spent in food service, food stores, local transportation, accommodation, entertainment, retail, these are local businesses. These are Main Street Idaho businesses. And so very, very important, the impact that this industry has. And certainly as we look at the impact this industry can and will have as our economy rebounds from COVID-19. Let's see here if I can get my slides to go. And so, yeah, briefly in North Central Idaho, this is a nice impact, right around $160 million in spending each year. And as we look at local job numbers here, we're talking about upwards of 2,500 jobs in the region, $47 million in annual earnings. And so, again, not just a big state impact, but really a regional impact as well. But as we know, 2020 has been very, very different. And I've shared this slide a number of occasions and throughout presentations over this last 8 months or so. These were some initial numbers that we had received from the U.S. Travel Association and their research partners at Oxford Economics. And these were some of the early on projected tourism impacts of COVID. And so we kind of use this as a benchmark to say, how are we doing? And because these are pretty dire numbers. And I think in some ways, I'll walk through some numbers here throughout this presentation. I'm a numbers guy, and I think it tells the story. So you may get very boring slides here, but hopefully the information is interesting and compelling enough for everyone. But as we looked at some of these numbers, there was a lot of concern, and we didn't obviously know what was going to happen when we were all kind of feeling around in March and April. And again, I think that the good news here, the silver lining, is that we are considerably overperforming these metrics. And not every state is, and not every region is. And so I do think we've got a lot of room for optimism here. But as we think about how things had been going prior to COVID, one of the metrics we use to measure some of our success is our lodging collection program. That's what funds our program. And so it's a 2% lodging tax in the same way, behaves similar to like a sales tax. Every time an individual stays at a hotel, motel, private campground, private RV park, vacation rental property, B&B, what have you, 2% is tacked on, and then that 2% comes back to us to help fund our program. And it's especially vital because that 2% goes to not only fund our statewide efforts, but it goes to fund Jenny and her local efforts, NCITA. I saw folks join from there earlier as well, funding regional promotion. And so through our grant program, these collection dollars go back out to the community for even more localized promotion efforts. And so we want to make sure we're growing these numbers as strongly as possible. And we've been on a really good trajectory. The last few years, we've been growing at a double-digit pace. We were staring at FY20, we were up about 10.5% heading into March. And so, we were looking at another very good year. And I think it's that testament, the fact we were having such a good year, to say that we ended only down 3.9% off of fiscal year 19, which was these last years have been the highest grossing years in the program's history. Even with the devastating effects of COVID, last year still ended up being the program's second best year, since it was initiated in 1981. And when we look at North Central Idaho, your trends have, in your area, you guys have followed kind of a similar trend, maybe growing a little bit less than the state's pace. You guys have been growing since 16, 17, and 18, and then in the 19 growing at about a 6-7% annual growth rate. 19 was a really great year, and I would extend my kudos to a number of folks for some of the changes and hard work that's gone into place recently. That grew over 12% in FY19 to from FY18 to FY19, and then FY20 again. I think we'll kind of illustrate some of the decline there. But Region 2 unfortunately was one of the hardest hit regions by COVID this spring. Particularly given the activities in the spring as we think about fishing and other outdoor activities, and a lot of the events, and certainly as it relates to the university, some pretty big hits there that I think that hurt the numbers in the area more so than other parts of the state. And then from a Latah County perspective, similar growth patterns. Again, right about 6% year over year, FY16, 17, 18, and then another really good year in 19, up 11.5%. So again, big kudos to folks who are, all the folks who are involved there, doing great things in terms of promotion, product development. I think we've been really on the right track regionally for the last couple of years, and it's really exciting to see that growth, and that's going to be huge as we go forward out of COVID. So let's see here, bouncing back between screens. So as I'd said earlier, I want to kind of just illustrate briefly sort of the regionally, how folks ended FY20 and where we saw some of the declines, particularly as we hit like March, April, May, and June. And you can see Region 2 was the hardest hit across the state. Somehow Region 7, despite even all the challenges in Blaine County with the early pandemic presence, they actually grew nearly 4% last year, which is still just mind-blowing to me. But you can see, the big hit in Region 4 as well. And again, whereas kind of Region 1, Region 6, maybe not quite hit as hard. It's been interesting to kind of see these trends evolve as we've kind of come out of this. Now, recently, we're starting to see some positive news here, which are kind of highlighted in green. I was hoping to have my October numbers. We usually receive our October numbers about a week ago, and we haven't received them yet. So we've been banging on the tax commission's door to get that information. So I don't have October collections for you, but through September, down at the bottom, you can see the state number year to date. So comparing 20 to 19, July, we were down 31%, then down a little less, 16.4% in August. And then September, 5.7, which is not a bad, not really a bad figure. We've kind of been saying flat is the new up. And when you look at Region 1, they were actually up year over year in August and September. And Region 2, had a very good September, and I think some reasons for a very good October here too, which I'll share in a few moments. You can see Region 3, Southwest Idaho, has been hit tremendously hard. Again, kind of the absence of business and conventions and events has really hits everywhere, but it's really hit Region 3. Region 4, pretty flat recently. And then, seeing Region 5 fairly flat recently. Region 6 in September was pretty incredible, actually up nearly 24%. Huge travel in and around the I-15 corridor, with no lodging available in Yellowstone. You see a lot of those folks come over to the Island Park, Driggs, Victor, Eastern Idaho corridor area. So, it is interesting to hear from folks who are saying, despite all of this, they're having record years. And, we can see some of that illustrated here in these numbers. But as I'd said, I think we've got some reasons for some optimism here. And, a few of these metrics that we talk a little bit about, or that we use to sort of gauge success beyond collections and spending and things along those lines, is occupancy percentage. So, what percentage of our rooms across the state are booked. And statewide occupancy percentage year to date, we're down 21.7%. But we're optimistic as we see this green line moving, as we get over to September, October, we're starting to trend kind of towards some more normal numbers of where we've been in 18 and 19, down just a few percentage points now each month, which is vastly improved, obviously, from what you can see here. I mean, I've shown these numbers at previous presentations and have heard, folks say, and very astutely, it's when you visually see where our numbers hit in April to, literally have 22.6% of our rooms booked in April. When you see it on this chart, it really does illustrate how quiet things got, how people did stop traveling, and how hard this industry was hit when you see where we've been in past years. But it has been good to see that uptick over the summer, and hopefully we're kind of in a place where we're normalizing here soon. From a regional perspective, you all are performing a little bit better than the state, down 19.1%. Had I think a pretty nice bounce into January and February there, but again, you see that real big dip in April, and you guys recovered fairly quickly. That July 2019 number is kind of a weird one. I actually went back and looked at that in a couple of different sources to make sure that was true, because I don't think one would expect to see that kind of a dip that month, but it was true. I've got it in a couple different sources, so I'm not really sure how that happened. But the good news is you look at October, this area was actually up, which is fantastic. Just 0.3 of a point, but hey, we'll take it. So, kind of heading in a little better direction there from an occupancy percentage. As we then think about average daily rate, ADR, again, statewide down 8.7% year to date. Again, you see the decrease in the spring, but not to the same degree as we saw from the occupancy percentage. Again, kind of getting back to some more normal, closer to normal numbers. And this is something we've paid a lot of attention to, because a credit to another good friend, Carrie Westergaard with the Boise Chamber. She convened a group of folks that we participated in back in March before there were any shutdowns or anything like that. And there were a couple folks from, I'm forgetting the group that presented. They jumped on a webinar. They were a national group, and one of the things that they talked about was kind of learning from the Great Recession in 08, 09, and then also going back to 9/11 and when travel really stopped in fall of 01. And their experience through those two crises was essentially that rates are very important. Rates, average daily rate, hotel price is very difficult to claw back. It takes a lot longer to claw back. People will come back faster. And I think we're kind of seeing that. You're seeing a little more uptick in travel. Those occupancy rate numbers will bounce back faster. It will take longer to readjust our rates. And so their advice at that time, what they were giving their clients and hoteliers and things across the country to say, don't cut your price so dramatically, because it will take a lot longer to come back. And so I think we feel pretty good about where we're landing here. I like seeing this number where it's at regionally. I think you guys are in a pretty good place as well. Down about 14%. It'll be good to see this number bounce back again, particularly as hopefully some more event opportunities. I mean, I know when we look at travel in the area, particularly Latah County as it relates to the University of Idaho, and if we can, get some university events back up and running, university-related travel, business travel in that sense will be huge here as well. So, but interesting to kind of see some of these rate numbers. I think we're holding a little steadier there, which makes me happy. One thing that we get asked fairly regularly too is how are we doing against our neighbors, and what does our competition look like? And so here's just kind of a snapshot of a few of the states that we keep more of a close eye on, and kind of showing where we're at ADR, RevPAR, and then occupancy percentage compared to them. And as you can see, I mean, we're in pretty good shape. Wyoming's ADR is only down like 2% year to date. So they really held on their rates. And I think that again, with Yellowstone closed, that just has allowed those hoteliers, because it wasn't like traffic slowed down over there. And I'm sure there's plenty of folks who made trips that way or in and around national parks. Traffic was record levels. And so with no lodging available in the park, you've got a lot of businesses outside of there that were able to make some hay and not drop their prices too much. But again, from a RevPAR perspective, we're right there, and then our occupancy rate, is right there as well against our neighbors. We're certainly not any worse off than our counterparts here, and maybe leading in some areas as well. When we also think about room revenue and rooms sold, again, we're from a revenue perspective, again, Montana's probably leading the way a little bit there, but again, we're not too far behind there. Utah's taking a little bit more of a hit. And then rooms sold, I think we're leading the pack there. So good to see that. I know each and every state has different challenges or significantly different considerations there, but we also kind of have roughly the same type of product, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go on here. But this, obviously, the access to the outdoors is really the common thread among our travel tourism identities, and so that's been, I think, very helpful for our region to bounce back maybe a little faster than some other parts of the country. I want to share some of this information as well. And as I'm looking at this is a really awful slide. So I apologize, Jenny, for the terrible slides you're getting out of me today. But one of the things that we use a number of kind of device activity mechanisms. And so that's just a fancy way of saying, if you see an ad, a Visit Idaho ad, and that's like not just us, I mean, that's literally everywhere we put our digital ads. If you visit any of our web pages, anything like that, we put a pixel on your phone, on your tablet, laptop even. And so we know if you've actually arrived in the state. And this allows us to track, in terms, we have a pixel on every piece of advertising digitally, and then every web page, and then we can track it based on media. So this allows us to say, if you saw an ad, if you're a mom in Denver and you saw a Visit Idaho ad and you went to our website and you ordered a travel guide, we're going to know when those events occurred, when you took that action from your phone. And then we'll actually know that if your family came into Idaho and your device connects to a Wi-Fi or a cellular network, we'll know you've actually arrived in Idaho. And we can also see, where did you go in Idaho and how much time did you spend there? It's like, we don't know the identities of folks. We just know the device, but it gives us a good indicator of is activity building and kind of what are the trends, and then from us, from a campaign side of things, what ads work best, what media works best to actually get people to arrive. So that's a long way of saying that, that we had a pretty decent summer in terms of device activity. And this is in the north central Idaho area there. You can see the blue is in state and the orange is out of state. And so a pretty balanced number there, whereas we would usually see, more like 7 out of 10 visitors are out of state. As we look at this, we're probably more 50-50-ish, which goes back to some of the takeaways and trends that I'll talk about a little bit later in terms of more local travel, more exploring your own backyard really is going to be a key theme for a long time, I think. But we did see some pretty good activity, and for a while there, I mean, you can see a real good uptick in and around the summer months, and then things kind of quieting down a little bit in the fall, which is we would all kind of expect. But again, maybe not so much in north central Idaho, as it relates to the university and what we would have otherwise been doing this fall. We'd probably have seen some pretty strong device activity, but not too bad here. I mean, statewide, week over week, we've been growing 2 to 3 points each week in terms of more and more activity. So people are getting out, people are traveling, people are moving. We've been concerned as we head into the fall because usually business travel, conferences, events, university events, that type of thing really drives more of our travel, as families and things go back to school. But we've seen some, again, there's reason for optimism there. I think we've seen, even though those types of events are very, very limited, if non-existent, we've seen some pretty good numbers here to show us that we're trending in the right direction there. We also keep an eye on things with like our OTA partners or online travel agency partners. So like Expedias, those types of folks help us out a lot with data in terms of search trends and booking trends. And I'm not legally able to share some of that information, unfortunately. But again, you know, I think one of the biggest trends, and this probably makes a lot of sense to everybody, is that, you know, things are at a 30-day booking window max. There are very few bookings. I mean, I think we're talking like 95% of bookings are happening within a 30-day window. If you think about outside of 30 days, there's only 5% of booking, of reservations are being made outside of a 30-day window, because we're still just kind of in this not sure what's going on and you know, struggling to make plans. And so that's obviously really difficult for our hoteliers and for our businesses when you're thinking that, you know, 95% of your business is going to be happening here. You know, you don't have a read on anything outside of that. And that really hasn't changed, unfortunately. I think we were hoping to see some of those numbers, you know, decrease in terms of the 30-day window, because typically in Idaho, it's 42, 43 days is kind of the sweet spot for when most people book their travel to Idaho. And so from when they book to when they arrive, and you know, this inside of just a month is really it can be really, really challenging, and that has not changed yet. And so you know, again, I think that's something that when we start to see that change, that'll be a real indicator of positive travel trends going forward. But again, kind of speaking to some of those numbers in terms of device activity, you know, I would highly recommend everybody who's interested in some of these topics or interested in some of this data. The U.S. Travel Association does a really great job. They have a portal, a research portal that they update weekly with not only their numbers, but also numbers from a variety of different media sources that we utilize, groups like Sojourn, Adara, Expedia. You know, there's some really, really great folks who we're grateful. I should make some plugs here for our team as well. We do monthly, we call them coffee talks, where we talk about a tourism topic. We bring in typically a national speaker. We've been very, very, Diane Norton, our tourism manager, is the heart and soul of our efforts, and one of my favorite human beings on the planet. And she has done just an unbelievable job of bringing some just tremendous speakers to come and talk with us. And we did a lot of these in the spring. We're doing it on a weekly basis. And we're going to move to a monthly basis here as we head into next year. But when you kind of hear from some of these, I mean, national, even globally leading travel tourism industries and experts presenting some of this data, the U.S. Travel Association does a really nice job of aggregating it in their research section. So I'd highly recommend checking that out if you're interested. And they do a weekly assessment. And so every Thursday night, they release kind of the previous week's data. And one of the key things we look at is weekly travel spending measurements. And you can see this was for the last week. Idaho was fourth in terms of one of the best 10 markets for year over year weekly travel spending changes. Back in October, I think we were first. We were number one for a few weeks, and we've mostly been in the top 10 throughout the summer. And you can see, you know, Montana's here, Utah's here, South Dakota's here, and you know, those are, you know, most of these markets have been, you know, pretty much the same groups, you know, really kind of since Memorial Day-ish. And when we see, you know, kind of some of the similarities here, you know, we're talking about a lot of, you know, some outdoor destinations here, and for us, that's really been our bread and butter, you know, for the last little bit. And then again, kind of going back to some of these initial impact projections, you know, I was you know, talking when we had our travel council meetings in May, and grantees and you know, kind of visiting about what we're going to be doing from a grant program. And looking outward, I mean, we were afraid, you know, looking at some of these numbers, that we'd be staring at down 40%, you know, in that ballpark for our fiscal year. And, you know, again, it's really nice to see that we're you know, likely going to be coming in significantly better than that. Some of our recent state collections, kind of going back to, again, sort of illustrate where we've been through the crisis. You can see just May, you know, how we fell off the earth there. May is kind of more reflected of April's numbers. You know, someone stays in May, or someone stays in April, taxes are remitted in May, so it's kind of a month lag. And in September, it's really good because it's the number can't even fit on my slide. The bar graph is too small at 5.7. So, and then kind of same thing here in North Idaho. I think, you know, September you guys were down even less, like 4.7% in September. And you know, the May, June, I mean, that's tough. I know that's a lot of university graduation and activity there that was lost. So, you know, that when we think about the state number down 53, locally down 64 in June, 65 in June, you know, that's a tough one. But July and August, I think you've overperformed. Well, July, you definitely overperformed the state. In August, we were pretty similar. So, you know, it's good to see, you know, these types of projections, and it is interesting to kind of see it on a statewide basis. You know, I think we now have what we're projecting now is to be down more in the 14-15% range for the fiscal year, which you know, would still put us in, you know, one of our better, like, you know, as you can see here, it would be our 4th best program year in history, you know, through a global pandemic. So it's kind of insane to think about, you know, that I'm so happy we're not down in that 40% range. I mean, 14% is still stuff, nothing to get too excited about, but it isn't going to be the devastating impact to the program and to our communities and our partners as maybe we were afraid of when we were thinking, you know, 40%. So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, what we're seeing program-wise and some trends, and then make sure to leave some time here for some questions as well. You know, as we look, when we do some surveying and we do, you know, we do a lot of work on that front to better understand who are Idaho travelers, why are they traveling here, how are they making their plans to travel here, and you know, as we start to see trends in terms of things like, you know, Jenny and you all have done just a great job in terms of culinary, beer, wine, food. You know, Colette and some of the work there as well is just as good as it gets, not only across the state, but really across the region. And so you start to see, you know, I remember a couple of years ago, we started seeing, you know, beer and wine go from like 2 to 3% of travelers saying they were interested in this to now we're like 9, 10, 11, 12%, you know, travelers interested in those types of activities. And so you really start to see those numbers emerge. As we think about top reasons why visitors come to Idaho, this is probably no surprise to anyone. Visiting friends and family is number one for most everywhere. I mean, unless you're like Las Vegas or, you know, something like that, you know, mostly the reason why this is pretty much the same. It's pretty much number one for everywhere in the country. But, you know, number two, experiencing the outdoors is likely not a surprise to anybody here right now. And touring the region essentially just means road trip, driving around, touring around. And, you know, 2020 really has been the year of the road trip. And so this has kind of set us up pretty nicely for what we've seen this year, and I think what we expect to continue to see. If we think about why folks visit North Central Idaho, you know, again, top 2 reasons are pretty similar and to the state, and again, probably no surprise. But again, as we get to like attending special events, you know, that really is a lot of university related, you know, events. And so, you know, getting those things back on track in Moscow and in Lewiston and in Pullman, and, you know, that's going to be a big indicator of when we can start to see, you know, more successful numbers here. And then again, you know, shopping is kind of another thing, like visiting friends and family. That's mostly number one everywhere for most places. That's not something I particularly understand why that's always number one, but that's up there. But again, I think where you see, you know, North Central Idaho really excelling here, you get into like camping, outdoors. I mean, that's big. Your whitewater, your rafting, your boating opportunities are as good as it gets anywhere in the world. And that history and culture is also really important. And I think that's going to be something really important for us to continue to focus on and highlight and elevate over the next little bit. That resonates with travelers in the best of times. We do a lot of traveling, particularly in our area of the country, to see history and to experience some different cultures, maybe Native American culture, that type of thing. And I think that's even more important now, particularly as school is a little bit more virtual right now. Those types of education opportunities, to kind of boil those into some travel is going to be something that's going to be really important here as we go forward. So a good opportunity regionally there for some increased attraction to those types of venues. But as we talk about some trends and some takeaways and some things like that, a few things that we're seeing, and I think I've probably highlighted some of this stuff throughout, but staycations and local travel, that is immense. And again, one of the reasons why I think we've done okay over the last little bit is it's sort of, what's old is new again. Idaho's not a destination where we're bringing in people from the far reaches of the world. It's not a particularly easy place to get to via airplane. 70% of travelers arrive in Idaho via car, truck, or SUV. So as we think about road trips, that's how most people travel to and around Idaho. So that wasn't really a new thing for us. We're not super dependent on air travel or, international travel or a big, feeder market that is all air for us. Most of our feeder markets are drivable. And, we talk about at the state, we call it an uncomplicated day's journey. So that's a direct flight or an 8-hour drive. With direct flights being what they are, we've kind of set that one aside. That 8-hour drive for a lot of folks this year, that's extended to 14 hours from a lot of locations. And when you think 14 hours, that's LA and Southern California and Phoenix, where we may have had some driving from those markets in the past, likely more flight market. But those folks are driving, and you can even extend that into like a Dallas or a Houston, where you're starting to see that traffic head north as well. Maybe there's a stop or two, but they're just making a big swing, and folks aren't afraid of driving those trips. And so we've adjusted some of our targeting there. We typically, are a little bit more open at the state digitally in terms of we don't really care too much location-wise where you are. If you show behavioral tendencies that would lead us to believe you're going to be a traveler with propensity to visit Idaho, we've tweaked that a little bit and brought it in a little bit more to our region. But we're still seeing travelers, still seeing good uptick from folks in Minneapolis, Chicago. Folks are still arriving from some of those more eastern destinations. We're just kind of moving it a little bit more to the Midwest. And then I think also when you talk about staycation, local travel, Idaho is a state that's experienced explosive growth. We've been the last couple of years per capita one of the fastest growing states in the country, and a lot of places in the Pacific Northwest have been that way. You think about the growth in Oregon and Washington, Spokane, parts of Utah, parts of Montana. So I think there's a lot of just new Idahoans and new, Pacific Northwesterners that are kind of exploring their own backyard, and that's pretty powerful. I think for like an area like North Central Idaho, in the past maybe you wouldn't have marketed to a Boise or I think some of those opportunities are out there a little bit more, versus just a Spokane or a Seattle. Maybe now you're talking Spokane, Seattle, but you're talking Portland and Eugene and, maybe Boise, and then maybe even like a Reno or maybe like a Missoula or a Yakima, Tri-Cities. You can kind of you reshuffle the deck a little bit with some of those locations, but I think you can reach some of those folks that are maybe a little bit newer. And then we talk about staycations, we're also kind of talking about micro vacations, right? And I don't know if anybody has experienced that this summer. I think, or the last little bit, I think our family is a very good example of that. We certainly didn't do any of our big trips or the types of stuff. We'd go to the coast for a week or, whatever it is, but we did a lot of weekend travel. We did a lot of 3-day weekend travel. We did a lot of midweek travel because you couldn't get a campsite. And so, you know, instead of that big week-long, you know, 10 days, whatever it is, there's a lot of, you know, 2-3 day trips here or there, a couple overnights, you know, shorter drive, couple of hours, couple nights back home. And so we were seeing this trend a little bit already. You know, again, I think that some of the reasons that, like I've said it before, some of the reasons why we've been successful is some of the things we're seeing in the pandemic were already things that were kind of happening, and the pandemic only just, you know, threw gasoline on it. But, you know, where we see some of these micro trips, this works well with, you know, more remote work, more remote schooling. And so I think this is something that we're going to kind of continue to see. On that note too, we're seeing sort of luxury travel rebound a little bit more quickly. And you guys don't have to look too much further than our friends and neighbors to the north at a place like the Coeur d'Alene Resort, you know, who's had, you know, pretty unbelievable year. And I think you're kind of seeing some folks who may be a little wealthier demographic, or wealthier traveler, maybe out of the Seattle area or something like that would have done Hawaii or would have done international. And they're saying, you know, we're sticking close here this year. So we're seeing some of those luxury numbers bounce back. And I think that, you know, whether we're talking, you know, exactly luxury or not, going to kind of some of the culinary, some of the wine, some of those types of experiences that attract that luxury traveler is something that is bouncing back a little bit more quickly, and is an area where I think where we can be pretty successful. And then, you know, safety is key, and I lump safety in as we talk about outdoor activities. And you know, it's probably not something I've spent enough time on today, but again, it's probably not something that should be a surprise to anybody. Outdoor recreation, outdoor activities were absolutely, I mean, that was the thing this summer. That was it. And you know, you know, whether it's rafting, biking, camping, whatever it is, people were outdoors because there just wasn't anything else to do. And that's what we have in Idaho as well as any place in the world. And so seeing those activities, seeing people exposed to those activities for the first time, or, you know, people who you know, are just tried and true in those activities and are just doing it every weekend or as much as possible, really drove a lot of our travel. You know, those opportunities for physical distancing, not wanting to be in an urban area, not possible to be in an urban area with some restrictions. So obviously that, you know, the outdoor trends are not going to go away, and that's very good for us in terms of our state's performance. But I would say from a community perspective, from a business perspective, you know, one of the things we're talking a lot about at the state is just regularly communicating safety and making sure that we are reminding people to travel safely, to be mindful of your destination, to be gracious and follow the rules, the local restrictions, the local ordinances, all of that, you know, because we want to welcome visitors. We just want to welcome them safely. And so that's something that's going to continue going forward, and something that again, I think is really important for all of us to keep in mind. I'll close with this. You know, this is something that we're tremendously proud of, and that we're seeing, you know, some recent surveying that's kind of given us the same type of marks. And again, this is something we were talking about well before the pandemic, but it's only become more important in the last year. And, you know, our friends at Longwoods, who help us with a lot of these surveys, you know, in the last couple of surveys, 75% of travelers to Idaho gave their experience a 5 out of 5 stars. And that's a pretty unbelievable number. Longwoods has told us on several occasions they can't think of surveys they've done where that number's been that high. Usually, you know, you'd be real happy with a 60, 65% number, and, you know, Idaho's in the 75% range. And then when you think about, you know, safety and security, 65% of Idaho travelers give it a 5 out of 5 stars. And so again, I think as we want to continue to see these numbers stay where they're at. And when we combine this type of service with our you know, lodging properties, our restaurants, our businesses, our retail, along with kind of our outdoor experiences, I think we're going to continue to rebound, you know, as successfully as anywhere in the country as we go forward here. So with that, I will stop rambling, and I'm ready to take some questions or some discussions, or you know, whatever Jenny and Mackenzie want to do.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate it so much. So we have gotten a couple of questions in the chat box, and I'm actually going to have Mackenzie address those to you directly, especially if a follow-up comes through. So Mackenzie, go ahead.
So Matt, our first question is from Dulcie, and it's regarding the landmarks and historic sites. And she's added a link in the Q&A box as well for folks that want to look at this report. But the American Alliance of Museums is projecting to close about 1/3 of America's museums because they may not make it through the pandemic. Yep. And she mentioned she doesn't know what other industries are projecting, like say performing arts, but Idaho's museums don't have a big safety net. So I don't know if you want to provide some more comments on that.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I think Dulcie's exactly right. And it is, it's concerning, and it's particularly concerning for the next few months. I've seen some research saying that independently owned restaurants, there's a significant number, like 30-35%, that are at significant risk of closure in, by January, February 2021. And so I think that I would share the concern there. It is concerning. I hope that we can get, I think the PPP and some programs like that, economic injury disaster loans, that type of thing, federal, those big SBA programs. Hopefully there's another round of stimulus coming in assistance for those businesses, because I'm real worried that we'll maybe be able to get a sugar high through the holidays with some visitor spending and some economic activity there, but the economic realities may come crashing down in kind of that Q1 of 2021, and it is very concerning, because those are especially when we talk about museums and theaters and things, those are locally owned in many of our small towns. These are not a part of big chains and things with massive financing infrastructure. These are locally owned businesses. And so I am hopeful that we'll see some additional stimulus come through and some business assistance there for those venues.
Awesome. Thank you so much. The next question is about marketing dollars. So what is the breakdown of how the marketing dollars are being used? Like traditional radio and TV, social media, email, etc.
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is, it's something that evolves a lot of changes to this. We are optimizing this constantly. And some of that just, you kind of begin with like, what's your budget? What's the number that you can allocate to media? And for years there, we wanted to do broadcast television, but we hadn't been able to. We didn't have the money for it. We couldn't justify those buys to give us, the exposure, the frequency, the gross rating points that we wanted to see. So about 4 years ago, we hit that number. We were at a place where we could now all of a sudden invest in broadcast in a place like Seattle, where we can invest in broadcast in a place like Portland, or some of our other markets, Salt Lake, obviously. And so that's we do this last year. We did about 65% broadcast in key markets, and then the remaining 35% is pretty much all digital. We don't really do much by way of radio. We do a little bit, but not a lot. And then we do a lot of social, a lot of content development, that type of thing. So I'd say it's kind of a 60-65% broadcast, 30-35% digital. In the last couple of years, we've introduced in-state advertising, which is not really something we had done previously, but some of that in-state broadcast has worked really well. And again, I think is for an area like North Central Idaho, if we can mobilize kind of a Spokane market there, and realize Spokane is an in-state, but I kind of consider it in-state. We joke, Idaho is a place that has 3 state capitals: Spokane, Boise, and Salt Lake City. And so Spokane's kind of an in-state market for us. And if we can mobilize that traveler to Moscow or to Lewiston or the North Central Idaho area, that's more valuable. That's as valuable as a traveler coming from Texas or from California or something like that. So seeing some of that in-state mobilization, we share that a lot with some of our smaller grantees, in Southern Idaho as well. To say, like for Cascade, for example, it's, Cascade can try to mobilize a Seattle traveler all they want, or they can focus in the Treasure Valley and just get Boise residents to come up there. That's going to work just as well. So really raising the brand's awareness in state has been a real key for us.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Kelsey asked, what was your experience like balancing a tourism program versus encouraging people to stay home and stay safe?
It was one of the strangest experiences of my life. Our team, one of our, of my professional life, I mean, our team has, we've spent years, all we're doing is talking about promoting Idaho and visiting Idaho. And now all of a sudden we're turning around and saying, now is not the time, please don't visit. And we put out a couple of video spots, we put out a couple of broadcast spots. We didn't, not broadcast television, but we put them out socially, and they're kind of ready for broadcast type videos. With see you soon in Idaho, kind of a message, and these are on our YouTube channel if anybody wants to check those out. But I was really proud of the work. I mean, I think the team did a really good job of turning these things around. And really the message was, we miss you. We can't wait to see you. Now is not the time. But when we can welcome you back safely, we are going to be here to do it. And so that, I think that was pretty good. But then, as we were watching a lot of our Memorial Day and our 4th of July numbers, and we certainly saw upticks in cases during those holidays. And it's crazy to say, what quaint times we were in when we were looking at the upticks in Memorial Day and 4th of July, thinking that was bad considering where some of the cases are now. But we were kind of looking at some of those numbers, and things seemed to go fairly well. So we went to more of an aggressive messaging right around the 4th of July. And I give the governor credit in that regard, and a lot of folks credit to say, to recognize the importance this industry has in economic rebound and recovery, and the key being we need to do it safely. And I think that a lot of the experience we've had and exposure we've had over the summer with our lodging properties and many of our restaurants, Idaho businesses have been working tirelessly to provide a safe environment for customers and their employees. And so I think it's been pretty good in that regard. But yeah, it was crazy at the beginning to say, stay away, don't come back. I'm happy that we've been able to do what we've been able to do, because we've talked to colleagues in Seattle and San Francisco and Chicago that are just shut down. They have no tourism program. They're putting any money into it. They are dark, completely dark. And I'm glad that we're not in that area. We're going to continue to work hard to make sure whatever promotion we're putting out there balances safety and leads with safety, because it's not, we're not in a cavalier, free-flowing, hey, let's all just show up. Like we need to do this safely. It's vital.
Yeah, thank you so much for your work on that. It is a challenging issue for sure. We have another question that's on a similar note. How can we support our smaller communities that may be overwhelmed by added pressures of increased tourism in our state, particularly because some surrounding areas view Idaho as more open than maybe where they are? And Dulcie provided an example about speaking with a resident in St. Mary's a few months ago. That summer was challenging because of added outdoor tourists, and they're visiting small grocery stores and other really local facilities, and maybe not always practicing the same safety protocols.
Yeah. It's a great question, and it's something we observed and addressed on many occasions over the summer. A couple things we did, and a couple things that we'd be looking at. We launched a campaign called Recreate Responsibly Idaho, and a lot of this was geared toward, as Dulcie had said, you've got a lot of first-time outdoor activity, folks who have never camped before. Who bought a tent and hit the road and didn't know to make reservations, don't understand distributed camping, none of that stuff, didn't understand fire. I mean, we had a lot of fires this summer that were man-made because unsafe campfires and things like that. So this is going to continue to be an education piece that we're adding in our website, and all the creative, all the messaging we're putting out there. And in terms of supporting local communities, I would just say, as those things are arising, our office can help, and our partners can help, whether it's State Parks and Rec. Our federal partners, BLM, Park Service, have been great to work with, on a lot of these initiatives. I think everybody's really trying to push kind of the education and in the coaching element of this. We've been, because you hear a lot of just, like Dulcie had alluded to, folks not wanting to wear masks or different things like that. We're so deep into this, and there's so much, you know, we've heard all of this stuff over and over again. And so I think it's really important that if we're learning anything here, that we're the tone that we take, the messaging that we take is one of coaching and one of educating and informing versus like telling people what to do, because that part isn't working very well. So as much education and coaching and helpfulness as we can provide at a community level and at the state level and through a number of partners is what we're going to kind of try to continue to do and focus on. We've done a few of those things, but there's certainly room for improvement, room for growth there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you very much for spending the last hour with us. We're right at 1 o'clock, so I'll turn it over to Jenny for some closing thoughts.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Thank you for filtering those questions. Again, a huge thank you to University of Idaho Extension for providing support, technology support for this. It's such a gift that you provide us. You'll see on your screen, my contact information is included, as well as Matt's. If you have any other follow-up questions, I'm sure he would definitely be willing to filter those. And we also will be sharing this on our YouTube channel. We'll distribute it through our social media channels as well as our newsletter. So if you know of anyone that really would get value out of seeing this and you didn't see them as a participant, please feel free to reach out to us directly, or you can just follow us on our YouTube channel or our social media. Matt, are there any closing comments that you'd like to provide the group before we depart today?
No, I would just thank you, Jenny. Thank you, U of I. I hope everybody stays safe. Please stay safe and healthy over the holidays. And please do everything you can to support Idaho small businesses. Please do it safely as much as possible, but let's keep supporting our main streets and our communities and our small businesses, because those folks, they need all of this more than ever before. So please be safe, and I hope everybody stays healthy these holidays.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you, Matt, so much. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon. And again, have a lovely holiday next week. Stay well.